Okay, so we're looking at the still looking at molecules, but we want to look at molecules that are a little bit larger now. So let's take a look at the first one, which is glucose. And the structure of the glucose is more complex than anything we've looked at so far. You can see here that we have this ring structure. And again, remember, every apex, there's going to be a carbon atom. So if you count up the number of carbons, we'd have one here, one, two, three, four, five, and then up here you see one, that's six. Okay, so glucose actually is C6 H12O6, and we can figure that out also. You can see here that if we look at the number of hydrogens, you've got 2 and 3. There's one down here, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, okay? So there's 12 hydrogens, even though all of them are not drawn, and then there's going to be 6 oxygens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we then see that the sugar, glucose, okay, has a formula C6H12O6, or we can say CnH2nON. And you can take a look at that on your page of the handouts. Okay, you can see the carbohydrates, which are on page 5. Okay, and we're talking then about glucose, and there's other types of sugars besides glucose. There's a fructose you might have heard of, and also there's ribose, and there's all different types of sugars, but some of them are monosaccharides, meaning they're one unit, and some of them are disaccharides. So glucose is a monosaccharide, it's a single sugar, okay? And here you can see our glucose again, and you can see it starts out as a linear molecule, and then there's an attraction between the two ends, and so you form a ring structure, okay? But if we take a look over here, here's our fructose, that's another monosaccharide. Ribose, okay, it's another monosaccharide. You see, this is more of a pentagon shape. Okay, fructose is more of a hexagon, but they're different than glucose, of course. They're all different. Okay, now we can get into the next level. When you put together two of the glucose molecules, if you combine those together, you get what's called a disaccharide, or a double sugar. Okay, so this is an example of maltose. Maltose is made up of two monosaccharides. It's made up of two glucose units. Okay, so now we're getting into a little bit more complex, into a double sugar. Okay, and if you, for example, combine glucose and fructose, okay, if you put these two together, you get a disaccharide. This one is called sucrose. Okay, so glucose and fructose it's a double sugar again, and they make up a disaccharide called sucrose. Okay, so you see we're getting a little bit larger with our molecules. Okay, now if you put together many glucose units, and this picture is drawn like this because it actually means that it continues both towards the right and towards the left, so it goes on a lot. It's very long, so you have lots of glucose units in a straight chain like this. This is called amylose, okay? And same idea, but if there's some branches coming off of it, like over here, then this is called amylopectin, okay? So we're getting now into what we call the polysaccharides, many sugars. So one sugar is a monosaccharide, two is a disaccharide, and then when you go beyond two, like in these pictures, we have many repeating glucose units, you have polysaccharides. And there's different types of polysaccharides. You probably know some of the names. There's starches, okay? There are cellulose, and there is glycogen. Okay, those are three examples of carbohydrates, which are polysaccharides. So we're going from molecules to very, very large molecules, which are called carbohydrates. Okay, so we go from molecules to macromolecules. Now, what is the function of these sugars. Okay, well, the sugars store energy. Okay, they store energy. And we will also see they're going to be part of the cell wall, but we can say for the most part that the carbohydrates, the sugars, they are going to be to provide energy, okay, and they're the main source of energy for all living organisms. You need to have your sugars, and that's what gives you your energy. Okay, so you can see here on the page, you have some examples of the disaccharides and the polysaccharides, which are the carbohydrates. So a single glucose is a molecule, and the carbohydrates are macromolecules, much larger, okay, much larger. Okay, let's see what else we have. Now, of course, where do we find starches? Of course, we find them in things like potatoes, okay? So that's just to give you an example. That's where they're found. So this is my little summary to show you what we've done. We've looking at the molecule glucose or fructose or ribose, all of which are monosaccharides. And when you have many sugar units together, we get polysaccharides. Some examples were starch, glycogen, and cellulose. I showed you two starches over here. These two are starches, amylose and amylopectin. They're just different types of starches. Cellulose we find in plants, okay? But anyway, all of these are what we call macromolecules, okay? So glucose is a molecule and the carbohydrates are macromolecules, okay? Okay, another molecule we want to look at are the amino acids, okay? Amino acids are very important. They all have the same structure. There's a central carbon, okay, and then branching off, there's four things. There's a hydrogen, there is a COOH group called a carboxyl group, and then over here there's an NH2, or there's an amino group, okay? And down here we have R. R can be variable. R means it's different. And since there are 20 different amino acids, and they all have the same structure, but there's going to be 20 different types of R's to give us our 20 different types of amino acids. Again, here you see the general structure of an amino acid, the central carbon, the hydrogen, okay, the carboxyl group, okay, C, double bond, OOH, the amino group, NH2, and then the variable group, the R group. And here are some of the R groups. Take a look at these pictures here. These are some of the amino acids, and you can see all of them have carbon. Okay, take a look at carbon, hydrogen, okay, the amino group, and the carboxyl group, okay? But look at the R groups, they're different. So if you have an R group that looks like this, then you have the amino acid called aspartic acid. If you have an R group that looks like this, which is completely different, you have an amino acid called lysine. If you have an R group that has this structure with a ring in it, then you have tyrosine. Okay, and so on and so forth. And as I said, there are 20 different amino acids, so there are 20 different R groups. That's the variable group. But they all have the same structure, okay? The C, the central carbon, the hydrogen, the amino group, the carboxyl group, and then the R group. So the amino acid then is the molecule. And when you start to put amino acids together, if you put together two amino acids, if you were putting one, here's another one, okay? Putting two amino acids together, you form a dipeptide, okay? Amino acids don't form disaccharides because they're not sugars, okay? When you put two amino acids together, they form a dipeptide, okay? A dipeptide. When you have more and more amino acids added on, you get to have polypeptides, okay? So the more amino acids you add on, after you have two, you get to what's called polypeptides. And when you have more than 50 amino acids linked together, you have a protein, okay? You have a protein. So we have the same idea here, you know, with the molecule making up the macromolecule, the amino acids, okay? For example, serine, arginine, tyrosine, all of these are amino acids. And when you have several of them together, you make up the polypeptides, or then the proteins. Now, the proteins are the macromolecules. One example of a protein is hemoglobin, okay? Now, we don't see in this picture the individual amino acids linked together, but they are. And you see here, there's actually 4 subunits, okay? So this is like a whole thing of amino acids that was originally a straight line, but now it's kind of coiled up, and it has a little pocket inside, and there's another one, and another one, and another one. So it's really 4 polypeptides all put together, making up something called hemoglobin. And these little pockets in here, okay, this particular protein called hemoglobin, this pocket has iron in it, and that's what carries the oxygen. And hemoglobin is something found in red blood cells, and it carries oxygen. Okay, so this is a protein that is going to have a specific function. All the proteins have different functions. As for example, the hemoglobin is going to be one that carries oxygen. There's also other types of proteins like insulin. Insulin is a protein, also complex structure. Insulin is a hormone, okay? Lots of proteins form enzymes. Enzymes are used to catalyze the digestive reactions. You have proteins that make up immunoglobulins, so they're for defense. There's other types of proteins that carry things around. Those are transport proteins. Okay. Hormones are proteins, as we said already. They're chemical messengers. And we mentioned the enzymes too. But there's all different types of proteins, and they're very important. So again, we go from looking at the molecule to the macromolecule. The amino acids are the molecules. 2 of them make a dipeptide. When you get to larger numbers, you have polypeptides, and then you get to even larger, the proteins. So for example, we have polypeptides and proteins like hemoglobin, insulin, enzymes, and so forth. So there's many different types of proteins, many different functions, okay? Many different functions for these proteins, okay? All right, so that gives us an idea of the amino acids, okay? So again, molecule to macromolecule. So that leaves one more biological molecule, which we will do in the next module.